the transformation of consciousness that's happening now is available to more and more people. Like, you don't have to have been brought up in a monastery, with a guru or something like that, or have had a near-death experience or any of these really dramatic things, because it's like the general level of consciousness has risen to a point where we're all really close to that breakthrough. If anything is sacred in this world, it isn't money. Just look at what money does. Any horrible thing happening on Earth, you ask, why is this happening? And it doesn't take long for the answer of money to come up. Why are we cutting down the rainforest? Why are we exterminating indigenous people to get the rare earth minerals? Well, it's because money's being made. And on a personal level too, so many people, why don't I express my joy, my creativity, to do something I really care about? Well, because there's no money in it. Will I be okay? So money exerts this kind of evil force. And so the book asks, why should that be? Because money isn't some, physical fact of the universe. It's a human creation. It's an agreement among human beings. And why have we created an agreement that drives us to do terrible things and that suppresses our best instincts? Our economic system has robbed the world of sacredness and filled our lives with generic stuff and strangers, generic people. And then, what would be a sacred economy? Well, it would allow us to recover the uniqueness and relationship that make the world sacred. It's still possible to pretend that everything's going to be okay, that the high growth of the 90s is going to return, that the scientists are going to fix the problems with climate change or the ecosystem, and that humanity's basically on the right track. Without a whole lot of self-deception, you can still believe that. But that self-deception is getting harder and harder to maintain. And the falsity of that belief, it's one reason it's getting harder and harder to maintain is that our experience of the world is reflecting its delusionary quality back on us. We're having all kinds of superstorms, and droughts, for example, and a health crisis that won't go away, and social crises, economic crises. These things cannot be ignored. So I think that that really all of these crises, they add up to a birth crisis, and it's propelling us into you could call it a sacred world, or a new world. And all of us individually, we're faced with a series of choices. Which world do we want to live in? And I talk about, when I say which world, what am I really saying? And so I use the story concept, the idea that our whole world is built on a story or on an ideology, or you could even say a mythology that every culture has. The story of the people, I call it, that answers life's basic questions, all the way down to the level of who are you? What is it to be a human being? And that story is changing. It used to be, for a long time, in civilization, right? Not indigenous people, but in civilization, it was what you are is a discrete, separate individual among other individuals in an external universe that's separate from you. And really, every field kind of agreed on this. Religion, you're a soul encased in flesh. Psychology, you're a mind encased in flesh. Biology, you're the expression of DNA seeking to maximize your reproductive self-interest, right? Every field agreed, and that conception of self has basically poisoned our planet because we treat it as if it were an other, and we treat each other as if we were others. And the breakdown of that story is bringing us into an understanding of interconnectedness or inner being. And so we're faced with a series of choices. Do we stand in separation, or do we stand in connection, inner being? And we can choose, as long as we want to stay in separation, but that choice gets harder and harder to uphold, and the invitation becomes stronger and stronger. And the longer we take, then the worse things get. You know, the more powerful the birth contractions become. But a lot of people are seeking to live in a new story, you know, and intellectually a lot of people agree with it. Yeah, you know, we're not separate. We're not separate from nature. We're not separate from each other, and we've had experiences that show us that, you know. But there's still, even if you grasp it intellectually, there's so many habits that we have of separation. And that means that a really profound healing process has to happen. Because really the understanding of inner being, that what you do to the world, you do to yourself, that everything that's happening to anybody is happening to you, that's the truth. And so what's happening in the world, in some way, happens to us too. You know, we fight nature, we conquer nature, we treat nature as an other when it's really part of self. And it manifests as autoimmune diseases, where the immune system treats part of self as if it were other. You know, it mirrors exactly what we're doing. You know, how do you change people's story? If not through persuasion and the force of logic, because that doesn't work. People always can have, you know, we don't base our beliefs on logic or reason. We think we do, but actually what we do is we have a belief and then we use reason and logic to justify it. It's really rationalization. You know, we choose the evidence that fits, we discard the evidence that doesn't, you know, where's that person's PhD and so forth, right? So given that, how do you change people? And I think that maybe the most powerful way to do it is to act from a place that is undeniably from a different, you know, from a different story. To do things that just do not fit into their world. Like acts of generosity fit into that category. Because part of separation is that, well, everyone's kind of in it for themselves. You know, we're all in competition. More for you is less for me. And when it comes right down to it, when it comes down to the money, you know, everybody's selfish. And receiving generosity or witnessing generosity is like this anomalous data point. It just doesn't fit in. And you know, this has happened to me. I become curious, you know, where is this person coming from? What world are they in? What are they seeing? It kind of opens up something in me, and it makes me feel maybe a little ashamed, but it's also very exhilarating, like, wow, I can do that too. Like, I get letters from people who have read my work, and sometimes they'll say, like, I read your book and I gave away all my money. And the magic that has unfolded since then is unbelievable. One way to look at all this is through the lens of the gift. People misunderstand it when I talk about gift economy, and they think that, you know, I'm advocating the abolition of money, which maybe, I don't know, could happen maybe in the distant future, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about bringing the spirit of the gift into the money system, which does involve a major kind of redesign of money. But in addition to that, I'm also talking about a shrinkage of the money realm and the growth of a gift realm, and it's happening already. You know, there's so many like car share things, Airbnb or you know, couch surfing, Craigslist, you know, all these things, for example, you know, online that allow people to meet each other's needs without exchanging money. And they kind of recreate what we used to have when, remember the days when we all knew our neighbors, you know, and if you needed something, you'd go borrow it, and people would help you out on your project, and you didn't need to hire roofers, maybe, or painters, you know, because people would get together and do it for each other, or babysitters. And you know, that's what community is.
Right, and then people wouldn't be separate.
That's right, because you need each other. You know, and today in suburbia, you look at each other, and it's like, underneath, you know, I don't need you. You know, because everything I need, I pay for. So that is kind of, that's one thing I do talk about, yeah, the return to a gift economy. The more that the environment changes to align with the principles of gift or the principles of interconnectedness, the easier it is to believe it. You know, in a gift economy, like an ancient gift economy, it was very easy to believe that as I give, so shall I receive. Because if you gave, you know, in those societies, if you had more than you needed, you'd give it to somebody who needed it. So your good fortune would be my good fortune too. Because if you had excess, you'd give it to me. So it was really all these teachings of karma, and the golden rule, that all was very natural. It was obvious that what happens to you, like you break your leg, and I'm going to be much worse off too because you were a good hunter, and now I'm going to have to take care of you, right? It was really obvious. It's not so obvious in our money economy, but maybe it'll become more obvious as these new institutions arise. We all pretty much know the problems facing us. We don't know what the origin of those problems is. We even know the solutions. The problem is right now that here's what the biggest problem is that we don't know what's stopping us from implementing those solutions. People have different theories, capitalism, greed, maybe it's something in us. I identify it as our defining mythology, as a story. And that's the level I work at, to change the story. But that's something we can all do. Because anything, like I said before, anything that we do that doesn't fit into the old story is disruptive to that story and inviting. It invites people to be in a new story. The things that we need to do to save this planet are basically insane from the perspective of separation. And so we have to begin to do that and to accomplish the impossible. That tight little self is opening up, and we're saying, yeah, I am this body, this separate ego, but I am also my family. I am also my community. I'm also my nation. I'm also the planet. And I'm not just a separate being in relationship to these things, but these are part of my being. That's it's something we can feel on some level. That's why it hurts when we see the pain of another being. Like, why should that hurt? It's not like some rational calculation that this is going to harm my self-interest. It's just a very visceral pain. So we've had the germ of this consciousness within us for a long time, and now it's blossoming, into concepts, into beliefs, into practices, and eventually into economic systems, political systems. Almost anything that we call alternative or holistic is really tapping into the new story of the people that I call inner beingness. Thich Nhat Hanh actually, as far as I know, was the first to begin using that term. But so to see what it looks like, you can look at the little pieces of it, and like, for example, holistic medicine or permaculture or, these experiments in consensus-based decision-making, nonviolent communication. All of these are coming from, like nonviolent communication, for example. It's coming from an understanding of what you're doing, what you're saying. It's because of where you are, and I want to understand that. And I know that if I were where you are, I would be doing the same thing. So non-judgmentality, all of these things are giving us a glimpse of what the world could be. But I think hope is really, it's a glimpse, it's a promise. We catch a glimpse of it, or we have an inner knowing of it, and we don't have the conceptual structures yet to accommodate that. So it seems unrealistic. But I think we're glimpsing something true. It does feel like a birth. Collectively, we're being taken somewhere. We're part of a process that has a purpose. It's not accidental that humanity's going through all this. That doesn't guarantee that we will be born alive through it. But on some level, there's nothing wrong. This is how birth happens. There's a crisis. The world falls apart. You get expelled from it. So the basic template of what's happening is quite normal. And it is, a time of uncertainty. You don't know what the baby has no clue whatsoever. What's it going to be on the outside? All he sees is a light, at the end of the tunnel. And we see that. We've caught a glimpse of it, starting in the 1960s, maybe. We caught a glimpse of the world that could be. And now we're being propelled toward it. So I think a lot of the stuff that we kind of judge the wealthy for, or just judge people in general for, greed and overconsumption, those are just symptoms. And when we try to make people feel guilty about it, then we're making them feel guilty for really they're just trying to meet their needs, you know? And it makes the situation worse because you're perpetuating this war against the self, which is really a reflection of the war against nature, and saying goodness comes through conquest. And there's this bad thing in you and you have to conquer it. But it's not. It's just a symptom of a real unmet need. And you find that when that need gets met, you know, maybe when the person falls in love or has a profound experience of connection, a near-death experience, something like that, then they stop consuming all that stuff because it wasn't really what they needed. Everything we have is a gift. We didn't invent the process to make seeds grow. We didn't invent water